Alright, my super fam. So Xilonen has been out for over a week now. I'm pretty sure you guys had quite a lot of time testing around and do all the stuff, as am I. Now, one of the biggest thing about Xilonen is that she technically works on most of the team comps. So many of the characters out there actually enjoys her benefit. However, there are some specific cases that have been able to get a lot of buff when Xilonen was released, which is why I want to make today's video so that it brings to you the attention toward these characters so that you're more aware of it, for potentially focusing Xilonen onto these kind of teams more to brings out a lot of the results, especially if you are the mains of these characters we're going to be talking in this video. Xilonen is here and she's an amazing character that we all want to pull, but the god of Hoyoverse decided to bless me with Dia, leaving me devastated. But thanks to Loot Bar, the goddess of Primogems, allowing me to top up at a discounted price, I finally managed to get Xilonen. So if you're planning to swipe for pooling, then don't forget to check out Loot Bar. If you know me, I've been recommending you guys Loot Bar before, since you can always save almost a 20% on all of your top-ups. With over 100,000 orders and so many good reviews at this point, you can be sure that Loot Bar is trustworthy. Here you can see my order receipts of all of my top-ups that I have done. So guys, be sure to check out Loot Bar through the link in my description, as it can be a great way for you to save your money, especially if you are topping up a large amount. Before we go into talking about the character that got many of the buff, I've also already have a specific video on Xilonen, going through most of the team comps that she would be in for all of the DPS character in Genshin Impact. So be sure to check it out after the video, as I'm sure it will be very helpful to you. Alright, so the first character that got a lot of buff whenever Xilonen came was Hu Tao. Our lovely Hu Tao is still getting buff, and I feel that she's the character that got some of the most buff over the years. Like first of all, back then when we had a changes to Hydro Resonance, where you now get basically a 25% max HP for a double Hydro team build for Hu Tao. That's actually insane. And then when Furina actually came as well, she's an extra Hydro character that you can put on a Hu Tao team, which makes it even better. However, some of the harder part was actually finding a good healer on Hu Tao team when you have Furina on her team, because many of the time you actually either you're going to be using Xingqiu in place of Xilonen, or you're most likely going to be using either a Bennett or a Jhin here in this case. So with Bennett, obviously Hu Tao is going to have an extra a lot of attack buffing. However, she does scale off of attack a little bit, but it's not as much as she would with HP. So Bennett isn't always a viable option, plus he only heals the on-field character. Therefore, you're not always making the most out of Furina, due to the fact that Furina just sucks out your team HP by just a huge amount, which is where Jhin was actually a character that has been used a lot. So Jhin does heal your whole team. However, Jin's a character that heals a little bit too much for Hu Tao, making it that most of the time it's kind of like a trade-off. When you're using Furina on Hu Tao team, you're not going to be able to get Hu Tao below 50% for that extra passive that she has, which is an acceptable thing because you're getting more damage off of Furina, but overall you're not getting the most out of your Hu Tao at the end of the day. Plus, if you are using Staff of Homage, you're not getting the below 50% stack as well. However, when Xilonen came, Xilonen actually solved most of those kind of problems, because not only she's able to provide insane number of buffing from the Resistant Shred as well as the Cinder City buff toward your Hu Tao, which of course is going to be in place of Bennett here, and then she also gets access to healing. Now her healing is, I'd say, similar to Bennett. It's not too fast as much as Jhin would, so you're still going to get quite a bit more time when your Hu Tao is under that below 50% HP threshold. So basically Xilonen is in a place where you would always love to have Kazuya in a Hu Tao team before, without sacrificing the need to have a double Hydro as well as a healer, which now makes it a lot easier to build a very good team comps for Hu Tao. Now the downside of course is that you're actually using a 4-5 star character team, so yeah, can get pretty expensive. However, you know, Furina and Xilonen are two of the characters that are most commonly being pulled on many of the accounts, so I think that's kind of fine. Plus, you know, Hu Tao is actually coming back in the second phase, so yeah, you can be sure that her values is still there. Like, she's still one of the best top tier pyro DPS character out there that you can use, and of course it's easier to use compared to Alikino. And when we're mentioning about Alikino, she does have a slight buff. If you're using you know, a team such as Bennett, Furina and Xilonen alongside with Alikino, overall that's a very good team. However, as you can see, it's very much invested team because you have basically two best healer on your account right now, as well as, you know, very good buffer as well, while not being able to actually heal Alikino. So I mean, overall it's still one of the very good team if you're using Alikino, but overall it is very much invested. The next character that also gets very nice buffing overall, I would say, is Ganyu. Now, Ice character, or you know, Cryo character, has been around the meta, you know, I think for the past 2 years now, especially when Dendro came. Like, before Dendro, we rely a lot on, you know, Cryo doing melt damage, but then afterward, you know, Cryo character just fell behind quite a lot. Now, hopefully in the future, there will be some kind of buff toward Cryo characters. But at this point in time, you know, Xilonen is doing a pretty nice job on a Ganyu team because of a couple of things. Now, whenever you want to pull out the most potential of Ganyu, most of the time you want to do melt damage. And that either you going with a burn melt team or, you know, just a normal melt team building for Ganyu, which comprise of, you know, Ganyu, Bennett, Kazuha, and Shanha if you're looking into the best damage possible team for her. However, you know, always the downside of Ganyu is that you kind of need a shield, so Zhongli is always present there, which makes it so that you kind of want to switch out either a Shanha or a Kazuha. If you're swapping out a Kazuha, then you will need Xiangling on that team, which obviously it's kind of like a downgrade toward, you know, a Bennett, Kazuha, and Shanha team, obviously. However, now that Xilonen has come, you can actually run Xylo and Zhongli on Ganyu team if you're still wanting to have a proper shield for Ganyu, and therefore you have a double Geo resonance, which is pretty much still a nice thing overall for Ganyu, and you can have a Xiangling, therefore Ganyu can still do melt damage. But now that Xilonen actually came, right, she is in place of Kazuha perfectly fine. She does everything that Kazuha mostly can and get the job done a lot easier for you. Plus, while you're technically also swapping out Shanha here, and Shanha has always been some of the best cryo buffer for your cryo character. However, if you're looking into a C0 Shanha compared to a C0 Xilonen, C0 Xilonen is always hands down going to be a lot better because Shanha C0 is just really hard to use and you need a lot of investment into her to use it properly. Unless you have, you know, at least a C1 or a C2 Shanha onwards, then yeah, obviously you can use Shanha. But overall, most of the account will still have a C0 Shanha. Therefore, having Geo Resonance alongside with Xylo here just do Ganyu a very perfect thing overall into team building nowadays. Next characters I would say are going to be, you know, Kuching and Cloran. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning these two characters is that their team builds are quite similar. So before Xilonen came, a lot of it comes down to, you know, aggravate Kuching building, right? And that team comprised of, you know, Kuching, Naida, Official, and then, you know, again, you have to have kind of like a healer, and so sometimes Baiju is going to be there, or, you know, if you're going to be forcing the situation and you don't feel like you need a healer, then Kazuha is definitely going to be there. However, now that Xilonen is going to be there in Kazuha's place, as well as having the access to healing, then, you know, running an Electro Charge Kuching team doesn't really sound that bad because you can now run alongside with Furina, Official, or, you know, Yai Miko and Xilonen very comfortably, right? Because Xilonen actually heals your team really well, and, you know, whenever you have, you know, Kuching or Cloran, you can still swap around your other characters to get healed by Xilonen. So Furina stack is still going to be there because she has enough HP to sap out of your teams. Plus, Furina and Xilonen is really good at buffing your team, so overall this team really does very comfortably for you and can many of the time be better than, you know, you running in an aggravate team nowadays. place, which is really good. Now, those were some of the characters that I feel like got a very nice buffing. However, we're going to be moving into the characters that actually got very massive buff after Xilonen actually came. First character I really would want to mention here is definitely going to be Navia. Oh my god. The difference between, when before Natlan Navia team building is a lot different from after Natlan actually came, right? Because before Natlan, Navia team building wasn't pretty much set in stone, and you can quite mix and match a lot of different sub DPS support character out there for Navia to get her, shrapnel up. But after Natlan came, especially, with the introduction of Kachina, who was able to use this in the city, her team was pretty much sandstone back then. But then after Xilonen came as well, like it's a direct upgrade toward a Kachina in terms of how many resistant shred she's able to give toward your Navia. Now Navia team is basically running alongside with Xilonen, Furina, and a Bennett, which, oh my god, basically all of these characters looking to buff everything that Navia has access to, which give her insane level of E skill damage, turning her into a character that has a lot higher place in terms of the meta, and making her a lot more reliable for you to actually just go ahead and tackle most of the abyss nowadays. Now obviously if you're looking into it, it is pretty much a very invested team, but overall, it's only a Furina and a Xilonen that you're pulling, and Furina has already been out for like a year now. She kind of have, a rerun here and there, so I'm sure many of you have already got, and of course Xilonen, yeah, many of you are pulling as well. So if you are a Navia main, I'm pretty sure you should already have this team built for her, which makes it so that even when they're using pretty much a free-to-play Navia, she's still able to deal very high number of damage, making it a very nice situation for her. Next character is going to be Mualani. Obviously, she is going to be here. Now, Mualani team struggles a little bit before Xilonen came, especially when it comes to, Night Soul Burst stacking. And Night Soul Burst stacking on Mualani actually helps you to deal quite a bit of difference in damage from her burst. So before Xilonen, Mualani teams mostly comprised of, Furina, Xiangling, and a Jin for healing specifically. Xiangling is kind of like a mandatory character on Mualani, so it's pretty much already set in stone. And then while if you kind of wanted to have a Kachina on Mualani team for Sin the City buff before, you kind of have to sometimes sacrifice Furina or for, maybe a Bennett in this place. But then if you're using a Bennett, it's attack buffing, and Mualani doesn't increase off attack, so Hydro Resonant is always going to be better. And so now that Xilonen actually came, she's going to be in Kachina's place, especially with healing capabilities, a lot easier for you to run the Mualani team, and of course with all of the buffing that Xilonen has with Sin the City, Resistant Shred, but moreover Xilonen satisfies, so much in terms of Mualani's Night Soul Burst stack. She even gets you an extra stack for Mualani, helping her to be able to get basically a 3 stack now in terms of Night Soul Burst, which makes Mualani team just basically, oh my god, on the top form at this current point. Now, I did mention before that Xilonen is really good at buffing Natlan DPS at this point in time. When we're talking about Natlan DPS, another character we're going to be mentioning is definitely going to be Kinich. Alright, so you guys may be wondering why I'm having a Xilonen on the Kinich team here, because obviously she doesn't shred Dendro. Now obviously I'm not saying that this is going to be a huge buff toward Kinich, especially you do have a lot of other options of team building for him. However, if you're looking into more of the free-to-play side of team comp building, generally many of the players build Kinich team alongside with Nahida, Dia, and then Bennett. However, Kinich isn't actually needing extra EM here, so Dendro Resonance doesn't really help. Plus, Nahida on Kinich team doesn't really help much with damage, and she's mostly going to be there for deep wood. So generally, you're not making the most of Nahida here in this team right now. However, if you switch Xilonen into Nahida's place, and then you give deep wood to your Dia, because while yes, Dia can trigger deep wood for Kinich, then Xilonen is actually giving Kinich an extra Night Soul Burst, and you already know how much of a big difference extra Night Soul Burst can be for Kinich. And plus, if you're somebody who have already invested into Xilonen's weapon, then wow, that's also more of a buffing towards Kinich compared to if you have Nahida and her weapon, then that's only basically buffing EM, which again, as I've mentioned, Kinich is not going to be using. Now, we already know that Kinich works really well in the Burnies here, and many of the time Emily is going going to be there, you know, in terms of best team for Kinnish. However, how many of us at this point in time actually have Emily? Like, if I look into it, I barely know any of my friends actually has Emily, right? I think only, you know, 1 or 2 of them actually has, and I'm kind of like an outlier who actually pulled for Emily because I actually like her. So yeah, obviously, if you have Emily, it's still going to be the best team for Kinnish. But if you don't, then you can actually use Xilonen on the Kinnish team, and his team will still do very, very well, which is definitely something for you guys to consider if you are a Kinnish main. And then another character that got basically very, very nice buffing when Xilonen come is Novelet. Oh my god, Novelet, not only is he already an amazing freaking broken character in Genshin Impact, but now he even got also a very, very good buffer for him once again. Because while before Xilonen came, you know, Novelet team building isn't technically set in stone. Like, many of the time you still have 1 flex slot for Novelet in his team, right? But now with Xilonen came, the crazy thing is that if you're building kind of like a mono hydro team for Novelet alongside with Furina, you can still have Kazuya and Xilonen on his team. And wow, you can already see how crazy this team is going to do in terms of damage wise. Because oh my god, you're using 2 of the best buffer in the whole game, Kazuya and Xilonen, but not to mention Furina is also going to be there. You already know how amazing of a buffer she also is. Sub DPS power for your whole team, and being a hydro character for hydro resonance for your Novelet. However, if you're also wanting to use a vaporized Novelet, you can run alongside with Xiangling, Kazuya and Xilonen, and oh my god, holy crap. Even if you're at a C0 Novelet at this point, many of the time you're still going to get his maximum passive stack to help him do a lot more vaporized damage that way. So overall, those 2 teams are very, very good right now for Novelet, depending on how much investment you've got access to your other character on Novelet team. But if you're looking at Novelet, is just one of the characters that got such insane buff after this and make it so that it's very hard for you to have another DPS character that can compete with Novelet at this point, right? Because it's just insane how much of a utilization he has alongside with Xilonen and his team building. So yeah, wow, free to play player out there, you guys are you know, eating really well with this. You're feeling like you're struggling with you know, DPS power on your account, you know, making a very good Novelet team like this is, I don't think you're ever going to have most of the trouble in the Abyss ever again. So guys, those are the characters that I think that got insanely buffed after Xilonen comes. I know that again, Xilonen can be on many of the other character teams as well, so don't forget to check out my team building. But if you're feeling that there are other characters that have got a really nice buff from Xilonen as well, feel free to leave it down in the comment section, as I always love to discuss with you guys there. If you're new to the channel, guys, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel to not miss out on my future Genshin Impact videos. Again, if you're trouble pulling for your favorite character, especially Xilonen at this point in time, don't forget to check out Loot Bar, as I'm sure they will be very valuable to you. I really appreciate you guys staying with me till this part of the video, guys, and with that, I wish you a super day, and I will catch you on my next video.